He'll tell us when we're ready.
You're waiting on me. Yes, we're ready.
Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to this very special event with Ganman, Cathy Toldi, who's coming to us from the Santa Cruz Zen Center, where she is a teacher. She is in the Suzuki lineage. Her teacher was the wonderful Katherine Thanas. I pronounce that correctly. I always say Thanas. Is that right?
Absolutely. Katherine Thanas. Yes.
Cathy Toldi spent a long period at Tassajara. She has a master's degree in organizational development, where she was a consultant for many years. And I'm understanding she's just about to retire, but I urge her to rethink that a little bit. Remember, 50 is the new 20 these days. Her wonderful essay, which we have been reading, Feeling Our Way to Embodied Wisdom, is about a subject that's important to all of us, which is about when we feel unwelcome emotions, even though we've been practicing Zen for so many years, and sometimes we feel guilty about it. So yeah, I know it certainly happens to me sometimes, and it happens to all of us. We have people here joining from many parts of the world. Bion is in Spain. We have folks in the United States. I'm in Japan. And we're going to have people joining later because this will be recorded. I just would like to encourage everyone just to make yourselves at home. We're going to sit very relaxed zazen for about 1 or 2 minutes. Hi, Finn. Good to see you.
Hello, Finn.
And then I will just turn over everything to Cathy and also let her introduce herself. But in the meantime, Cathy, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have
Thank you.
you
I
here.
feel very welcome, and I really appreciate the invitation.
This will be wonderful. Let me just ring the bell. We'll sit for just a minute or two as you are, and then I will turn things over to Cathy. Thank you, everyone. Let me again welcome Ganman Toldi and just say thank you again, and over to you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for making time to come and participate. I'll speak a little bit about my reflections on the essay that I wrote in the book. And what I'm really hoping is that you will think of questions and sharing of your own experience with regard to this area so that we can engage in discussion. I'm also really happy to teach about points, but I'd much rather teach about the points that interest you rather than what I imagine, since I don't really know you. So I'm hoping that you'll let me know what you're interested in, and then I can, take it from there. But basically, just can I see a show of hands how many people did read the article? This isn't like a test or anything. I'm just curious. Okay, so some did, some didn't. That's fine. Good. Well, basically, this is an essay that I wrote at the end of the 2016 presidential election. And as we know, we had a president who was elected in the United States, and there were a lot of emotions that came up for many of the people well, for everybody had different kinds of emotions. But in the circles I'm in, I'll confess, there was a fair amount of angst about it. And a lot of questioning of, oh my God, how am I supposed to practice with these emotions that I have coming up? There was anger, there was grief, there was fear. And I'm sure for many people, there was elation and joy. That's part of it. But this isn't a question that's unique to that particular circumstance. I would say as a teacher that this question of, oh, how am I supposed to practice with this, is probably one of the most common questions that comes up in the engagement of questions and answers. And usually it's some version of, uh-oh, I'm having really strong feelings. And then there's usually some apology. Ooh, I'm a bad Buddhist. And that's the opening, actually, of the article. My friend, I'm being such a bad Buddhist, my friend announced as she came through the doorway. I feel hatred in my heart. So I just think it's so interesting that we think that somehow this practice is supposed to make us so that we're people who don't feel strong feelings. And I find that this is a subject that I write about a lot and I teach about a lot because it baffles me why this would even be a problem for us. So I'm going to out myself from the very beginning that that's my bias. I view emotion as energy, and it's what makes us human. The fact that we can feel is one of the great gifts of our human capacity. So maybe it's more like, for many people, maybe for some of you here in this circle, not so much about not having the feelings, but how to practice with them, maybe skillfully or wholesomely as we engage with others. But I will say for many, it's about even just having the feelings in the first place. So I don't know where you are on this spectrum, and I respect wherever you are, and I'm really happy to speak to wherever you are and wherever you want to go. But what I did in this article, and it's what I often do, is I go into the canon, I go into the Buddha Dharma, and I look for examples of emotional practitioners. Because I feel like our ancestors, I'm Zen. I mean, I've dabbled in other areas, but I would say I'm pretty solidly in the Zen side of things. We may not always talk about emotions, but we are emotional. All the way to Dogen. I mean, I put in the password to come into this virtual Zendo, and I typed in Dogen. So I'm presuming that Dogen is an esteemed ancestor in your collective practice. Dogen himself, one of my favorite stories after all of his searching, trying to find a true teacher, trying to find the true Zen way. And he goes on that long boat trip and he goes to China and he finally walks into Ru Jing's practice place and he sees them putting the robe on their head and chanting the robe chant. And what does he do? He soaks his lapel with tears. This is what he says in his journal. I love Kaz Tanahashi's book about Dogen, because he puts Dogen's journals in there. And how good is that to be able to read Dogen's journals? I soaked my lapel with tears. So this is not an ancestor who said, uh-oh, I better not feel too strong of emotions. He is sobbing with the recognition of the true Dharma. And so, in this article, in my own little way, I tried to make a bit of a collection of other ancestors who express emotion. One of my other favorites, he's not in the direct Dogen lineage, but he's the one who became the great teacher, Seppo Shui Feng. And I love this ancestor because, again, his enlightenment story was, and I write about it in here, the Dharma brothers, Yentu and Shui Feng, out on pilgrimage, took refuge in a barn. Hey, you practice in a barn. There they were during the storm. And Shui Feng was sitting upright and sitting zazen all night, trying to be a good Buddhist. And his friend was chastising him, and basically Shui Feng confessed his long time confusion and insecurity about his practice. I've done nothing but made mistakes. I don't understand it. I've practiced for so long. And his Dharma brother bursts out, haven't you heard that what enters through the gate is not the family jewel? It must flow forth from your breast. In the future, your teaching and mine will cover both heaven and earth. And this was Shui Feng's enlightenment. Oh, it's not about what I study. It's not about what I learn out there. It's that which flows forth from my own breast. Again, this is an emotional experience that our ancestor is having. And then sweet grandmother, Satsujo, who is a student of Zen master Hakuin, again, in the essay I cite her, she was weeping profusely after the death of her granddaughter. And so her neighbor, and have you heard this kind of thing before when somebody comes up to you, her neighbor comes up and says, I heard that you received a certificate of enlightenment from Hakuin, so why are you carrying on so? The nerve of him. But he did that. And people do that. Why are you, you're angry? But I thought you were a Buddhist. I hear that. Or, oh, you're passionate? But I thought you were a Buddhist. And I finally got so tired of that question that I have a stock answer and it shuts them up right away. I say, I'm a bad Buddhist. And then there's nothing they can say because I'm admitting the thing that they're accusing me of. So Satsujo, the grandmother, basically what she said. Now, do I say what she said in here? Yes, right. Here's her answer to him when he says, I thought you were enlightened. Why are you carrying on so? You even have a certificate of authorization from the master. What's your problem? And she says, you idiot. My tears are a better memorial than 100 priests chanting. My tears commemorate every child that has died. This is exactly how I feel at the moment. So this has been one of my missions is, okay, we can go into the canon and we can select out whichever stories move us that are aligned with our understanding of practice. And certainly one can go into the stories and select out the stories about rigor, discipline, holding it together. Those are great stories. They're wonderful stories. And yet I confess, for my bent in life and my teaching and my work, these are the stories that I find to be the ones that are more helpful because they allow me to now feel like a human being because I also have these kinds of emotions. One more little pitch I'll make, and then I'll shift gears a little bit. The Brahma Viharas, I feel like that is another And I didn't put that in the essay because I had a word limit. So I didn't put it in, but I think about it, the very nature of the Brahma Viharas, the great vehicles that help us with having a wise heart in our practice. We have to be able to feel our emotions very strongly to practice the Brahma Viharas. Because, for example, mudita, sympathetic joy. How can I feel joy for your joy if I do not know the experience of joy? So right there, the Brahma Viharas are teaching us, feel joy. Let yourself feel it. Let yourself feel that beautiful feeling of letting joy penetrate the heart and the body. And not only your own joy, but can you then recognize and resonate with the joy of others? Same thing with metta, loving kindness. How can I possibly express loving kindness to you if I don't let myself feel love? Feel love in my own body and see it and feel it for you. Karuna, compassion. I suffer with you. I too feel anguish. I too feel fear. I'm suffering with you. You are not an object over there. Oh, you poor thing. I pity you. That's not karuna. Karuna is suffer with, compassione. I feel it too. Your suffering is my suffering. What can I do to help? And upeksha, I don't know, upeka, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I would say upeksha because I've seen it with an SH before. Equanimity, again, I think this misunderstanding, equanimity means I don't let myself get flustered. I don't let myself get bothered. But how do I do that? By neutralizing my feelings. I say, no, you feel it. You just know how to ride it. You know how to not get knocked off center by the emotion. You've got a root. You're rooted. You can stay in the middle of that, of the careening chaos of our lives, but it's not that you don't feel it. You feel it like the bamboo feels the wind. The bamboo doesn't go, no wind, wind bad. Bamboo goes, yeah. In fact, I have a card right here on my wall. When the root is deep, there is no reason to fear the wind. They say Chinese proverb. Who knows where, but that understanding. So again, I might be preaching to the choir, I don't know, but to me, there's just example after example after example that we can draw from the Buddha Dharma that encourages us to have our feelings, to honor our feelings. And then the question is, okay, and then how do we interface with our social and interpersonal relations so that we are able to, work skillfully with and practice with, rather than pretend we don't have or, bypass our emotional realm. So that's my frame for the gist of what I wrote and why I wrote it. And I have a lot of other thoughts and ideas about this subject, but like I said, I would much rather speak into and with a field where I know what interests you and what your struggles, your joys, your questions are with regards to this subject. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and hopefully 1, 2, 3 of you might raise your hand. We'll take it one at a time and just share either how it is that you relate to this subject. I'm certainly also fine if you want to challenge or poke me on anything, or any questions that you might have. And then I'll kind of plan my next set of shares depending on what I hear your interests are. So at this point, Jundo.
I'm going to jump in. We, because of the hour, we had a couple of people from Europe who are going to join, but it's a little past their bedtime. So
Yes.
they were kind enough to write me questions beforehand. And one of which I will briefly summarize here.
Right.
There are emotions and there are harmful emotions. and there are really harmful and destructive emotions. And how do you know which is which, and when do you go too far? And the question goes into, when do you, for example, should you go outside of Zen and maybe seek therapy for anger or sadness because it's gone too far?
Beautiful question. Great. So why don't we just start with that? I'll kind of take them one at a time, and we'll start with that. I'll speak a little bit about my thoughts. Anybody else who wants to chime in, and then when we feel like we're done with that, then we'll take the next question. Yeah, that really is, I think, the threshold question that I think is the really wholesome one to deal with. And the indicator for me is this causing harm? You know, for example, is it causing harm to myself? Is it causing harm to another? So let's take anger. Anger is a real common, challenging emotion that at least a lot of people come to me with. What am I supposed to do with this feeling? Like the woman in the beginning of the essay, I feel hatred in my heart, right? So the thing about anger, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the work of physician Gabor Mate. He is a Buddhist practitioner, and he's first and foremost, though, a physician who's worked a long time in the field of addiction and trauma. And he has some wonderful books. When the Body Says No is one of them, and his most current book, The Myth of Normal. And he points out that anger in and of itself, it's just energy. And yet, because it has this kind of fiery quality, often we don't know, we think that it's bad. And so we either pretend we don't have it, we stuff it. I mean, this was in my family. My parents, they did not get angry. You know, some people are raised in households where there's a lot of anger. That was not the case in our family. It wasn't that there wasn't anger, but it wasn't expressed. It was never modeled that it was expressed. And in Mate's experience, that is the number one situation that people who come to him with cancer and immune disorders and a lot of different kinds of physical ailments have in common, is that they don't express their anger. They suppress their anger. So it's unhealthy to me as a person, as a human, if I have this arising of this emotion that might even be coming up for very appropriate and good reasons, like setting a boundary or the need to make some kind of change. And if my solution to that is to try to stuff it, that's actually harming my body. And he has these scientific studies that show that it impacts the immune system, and it actually is a really, really harmful thing to our body. Okay, but that doesn't mean that, then the solution is to rage at everybody, because that harms others. You know, people who grew up in families where there were ragers, they're like, that's harmful, that hurts. So what is it? Well, I think of it like, it's if it's energy, let myself feel it, let myself release it, but don't make it something to put on to another. It's like a rainstorm. That, to me, the healthy response with anger is let myself rain, let myself release the energy. And then it's not going to harm me, and it's not going to harm another by me, blasting somebody with that anger. So the second part of the question for me would be, if you find that you don't have the resources or the wherewithal to know how to release your anger, that's a perfect time to go and get therapeutic assistance. Whereas the problem I have with some of the just strict Zen or Buddhist approach, if it's the precepts, some of the precepts say don't be angry. And some of them say don't be attached to anger, or don't harbor ill will. I think the devil's in the details, because don't be angry. Well, what do you do then if you are angry? What's the message there? Don't rain, storm, rain cloud, don't rain. Good luck, And I think often that's what not only can lead to us harming ourselves, but can lead us to harming others, because it comes out as a blast, because it's been so repressed. So if you don't have the resource or the rhythm or the wherewithal to be able to take care of it yourself, manage it yourself, or learn how to communicate anger in ways that aren't blasting, then that's a great time to get help and therapy. And I don't necessarily think that just practicing is going to be helpful for that. In fact, I see a lot of practitioners who struggle with that. You know, I've seen lots of community fights and people get taken down by people who are supposedly not being angry. You know, so, you know, I think rather that not being attached to anger or not harboring ill will, that's way more helpful for me as a person, as a practitioner, than don't be it. So that would be my offering. I'm wondering if that brings up anything that anybody else wants to add into that from your own experience. I welcome you sharing your experience with this for the person who asked the question before we move on. Yeah. Jundo, did you raise your hand?
Oh, the person had written in. So, I'm going to encourage anyone, we have people viewing at home too, or anyone later who sees this, if you send an email to jundotreeleaf@gmail.com, I'll be sure Cathy gets it, or I'll read any today. But for the people here, I hope nobody be shy. Everybody, I hope, has something to express. Raise your hand.
Yeah,
And,
let's have a little group, check-in about, like, what do you do with it, or what's been your experience, either as a giver or a receiver or someone who works with this issue. Love to hear a couple of your experiences.
yes, please. Bjorn.
Okay, I'm not an angry person, so I have outbursts, like it's fast range coming down. I deal well with people bringing anger to me, for example, because I know it comes from a place of suffering, and it requires a compassionate acceptance. Just, let me embrace that anger that you're giving me. Let me take the punches, and then, when you're done being angry, we'll see how you feel about it. I'm worse when it comes to expressing it, in the sense that I'd rather keep it here, turn away, have my little moment, and then come back, because it always makes me think I can't set that example for someone else, or I can't be the trigger for someone else's empathy or compassion. And sometimes it's a little bit of a burden, I guess.
What feels like the burden to you?
When you don't want to be the trigger for someone else's compassion and empathy, so you don't want to share that anger. You'd rather move away and have your little outburst and reaction, and then come back and be all zenny.
Yeah.
For me,
and that might be really skillful. I mean, again, we have to weigh, does that person really need to know everything that's going on inside here? Maybe it's fine for me to have my own experience with it, have my own intimacy with it's my anger. Let me be intimate with it. And yet, on the other hand, it might be really helpful in the relationship to say, that thing that happened the other day, wow, it's really hit me in a way that I feel like it's getting in the way of our connection. Are you open to hearing what happened, what came up for me? But that's real different than, and that's part of it too, is I think, and it's a skill. I had to learn it. I did not know how to do this because I didn't have it modeled, but the ability to actually talk about it without having to be raging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess in a way, there's this balancing act that needs to happen where you don't make the relationship one way.
Absolutely.
Because it tends to take away from the depth. And there's a point where the other person will just shut down, I think, because they don't get anything back. So, you gotta choose how much anger to put out or how much emotion to put out before it becomes, before it sticks to the other person.
Yeah. Absolutely. And knowing who that other person is. And this is where, to me, the biggest indicator, and this was true for me in my organizational consulting, as well as looking at things with a Buddhist lens, is what's the impact that I'm having on the other person? That's my indicator about what's wholesome and not. It's not my theoretical ideas about what's right and wrong, though that can come in play, but it's what's the impact? Is this supporting awakening or not? Is this wholesome or is this causing pain? Because some friends are really, they love it. They want to hear it. Bring it on. Bring me your anger. Other friends or intimates, it's like, no, it's gonna be a barrier between us. So what, like just what you said, that's so beautiful. I think watch the other and notice the impact that we're having. That's probably the best indicator for what's the right thing to do, what's the skillful means, is what's the impact that is having, and is it contributing to awakening? Is it contributing to interconnection? Is it contributing to intimacy, or is it becoming an impediment? Yeah. Others, and thank you so much. Anybody else around the circle who wants to put your 2 bits in on this? Yeah, Eugene.
Thank you for bringing forward your material again. It's been a while since I read it. One of the issues for myself and for others that I listen to is, can we even identify what the strong feeling is? And what is the need that is being expressed under that? And this is a place where I feel my Zazen actually helps, that over these many years, learning, for example, oh, for me, my anger lives in my lower belly. When that part of my body is stimulated in some interaction or even in some memory, I go, oh, that's what that is.
Mm.
For me, fear lives in my upper right shoulder. So when that goes, and I'll exaggerate it, but it's actually a microscopic movement at this moment. It's a little thing that fires off. Oh, when that happens, now I know I'm afraid. Yeah. So then I can go, what is this? And in our lineage, we then ask, what is the basis of this? Now I can actually begin to identify the need. Yeah. Actually identifying what the feeling is first. Yeah. What English language word or other language word would I put on it? For me,
yeah, which is mindfulness practice. You're really talking about then that these arisings, these waves of energy are actually then can become a source of inquiry for studying the self. Yeah. And in fact, I'll just say that's where we went in the essay. This practitioner who had come in the door saying, I'm being such a bad Buddhist. I'll just read the kind of near the end. I do a little bit of the practices that we did. So let me find that part here. Right. Practitioner, she came for support, feeling hatred and guilt, and judging herself a bad Buddhist because she had these feelings. So what did we do? What we didn't do was engage in a conceptual discussion about what makes one a good or a bad Buddhist. We got present. I think this is what you're talking about. We got present in our bodies, in the here and now. We started with a hug. Not just a momentary pat on the back, but breathing together, heart to heart. As we stood in silence, I felt her body began to relax. This is where practice begins, stopping, taking the inward step, letting awareness settle down into the felt sense of the energy in the body, and then listening to the wisdom of one's inner truth. You know, she said, if I really touch my deeper experience, there's something under what I've been calling hatred. What I really feel is more like revulsion. She paused and kept sensing. And if I go even deeper, what there is profound sadness. I feel like what I really need to do right now is stay home and cry. And so this is so often true. And I know for myself with my own times when I've studied, say, anger or one of the more upsetting emotions or the ones that can cause harm, if we can settle down and actually study it and go to the root of it, it begins to transform often. when we get closer to the core of what's really going on. So I think that's a little bit of the direction maybe you were suggesting. Correct me if I took it, the wrong way, but.
No, not at all. You didn't take it in an inappropriate direction. I think where my feeling was going with it is once we're able to feel it and identify it, maybe even put a word on it, now we can actually make a choice about how to respond, whether say it out loud to that person in the moment, or whether to wait a couple of days, or whether to seek somebody else who can listen carefully. That you actually have a choice.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. How about if we take another one of the questions, unless there's something burning that somebody wants to say on this subject? Yes.
We had one from someone at home that ties in with what Jean asked, so I'm going to drop it in.
Thank you.
Tony thanks you for being here, and asks about spiritual bypassing, and how do you know when you're using your Zen practice to cover over emotions? And I'll add a little asterisk there. And how do you know when you're wallowing in your emotions too? And that's related to. And you say, oh, it's okay for me to feel all these things because Cathy told me it's all right to feel all this.
Right.
So how do you do that?
Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought that up because, of course, there's always two sides, right? Anytime talk about the relative, then you have to talk about the absolute. And if you talk about the absolute, then you have to talk about the relative. So I'll say a couple of things about that. The term spiritual bypassing was coined. I'm just looking at some notes because I actually have a lot of notes that that provided the context for this essay that I never got to write about. But John Wellwood is a psychologist, and he coined the term spiritual bypassing, and meaning the tendency to disregard emotional troubles and go right to the transcendence. So, and us spiritual people, we love to do that. Oh, I'm spiritual. I don't deal with the messiness of the daily world because I'm spiritual, right? But what Wellwood found was that many of his clients who came to him, who were really, really expert practitioners, continue to have all of these really difficult personal problems or problems in their relationships, even though they were imagining themselves to be transcendent. And that's where he coined the term. I think, if you're bypassing it, how's your life working? How are your relationships? How are things with your partner, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your Sangha mates? That's where the rubber meets the road, right? So I can, and I've known, and I've myself been this one too, where, I can tell you all these wonderful dharmic things, and I can quote this and quote that, and the 5 thises and the 4 that's, but then, but how's your relationship going? And so the bypassing would be if somehow your spirituality is allowing you to not do the work of going under the hood and getting the help you need if it's not working. Right. By the same token, the wallowing piece, that's such a good question. Let me just look for a moment because I want to talk to it. Let's see. You know what? Rather than trying to find it, I'll just go into my own experience and think about it. It's about it's the attachment part. At some point, emotions, they're just like thoughts. I think it's just the same as with our thoughts. Thinking is a fabulous capacity that we have. It's what allows us to invent things, to create things, to solve problems. But as we all know, obsessive ruminating thinking is it becomes toxic. It takes us out of the present moment, and it just puts us into this echo chamber of obsessive rumination. And I think that Buddhism is wonderful. It's like probably my favorite strength of the Buddha Dharma is how it encourages us to continually study your mind, get really intimate with your delusion, with our delusion, Dogen, study Buddha's study delusion. And I think we can be just as deluded about spinning obsessive patterns of emotion as we can about spinning obsessive patterns of thought. When we become so identified with our stories of our emotionality that, we become this victim forever. We become so fragile that we can't do anything, that nobody can talk to us because we get so reactive. I think that becomes then a little bit of an indicator of, okay, maybe you should do a little bit of bypassing. I just made that up. That's a joke. Haha. There's a time and a place for going deep and going within, and there's a time and a place for saying, okay, let's just take a breath and let that go. Let's be here now, rather than turning and ruminating. So again, I think the unwholesome indicator would be rumination, repetition, and paying attention. Is this actually helping me to liberate my suffering, or is it augmenting and extending my suffering? And that's tough. That can be tough love, because we love our suffering. We love our little boo-boos. We love to identify with our problems. And it can be hard, for a teacher or a friend to say, I'm getting tired of that story. Or say it to yourself. So, but that could also just be a very cruel thing to say to somebody who actually needs to have you hold them and let them feel their feelings. So there's no absolute way here, but again, what's the impact that this is having overall? Is it assisting liberation, or is it increasing suffering? Any other thoughts about that question that anybody has here? Either the bypassing or the excessive emotional rumination that isn't helpful? Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's me again.
Please.
It was either you or Jean before that mentioned intimacy, which I
Probably
think
me. It's another one of my favorite subjects.
there you go. Being intimate with, for me, that's an important thing. Being intimate with my, I want to call them offenses because we're repeat offenders. There are certain emotions that got the best of us once or twice, and then it's just those are the things that keep coming and keep coming. So I think for me, being intimate with the thing that plagues me helps me identify it fast, like Jean said, define it, put my finger on it, know where it comes from, know how I react, and then not nurture it. And I think
Don't water it. Yeah, you don't have to water everything.
I'm gonna give like a short but clear example. Yesterday, I think I spent roughly 2.5 or 3 hours crying, and it wasn't ugly crying, it wasn't sad crying, it was empathetic crying. It was a sadness. I came upon these stupid videos of people doing generous deeds for the homeless, and I went in a loop of watching them, and I noticed that compassion grow. I was like, I need to look for a place where I can do that, where I can help with that. So for a moment I thought, I'm ugly crying at 2 o'clock in the morning in bed with my phone in my hand. And the next moment I thought, I'm nurturing compassion. This is not a sad crying. I do catch myself though nurturing sometimes different emotions that have me not angered but agitated. Stuff that I see on the internet, stuff that people say. And that's where that intimacy, I think, is important, because I know when to catch that. And I go, no, I see you, but I don't want you in my house. You can go.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking, I'm thinking it's like we're driving this very, very complex car. The human mind, the human emotional system, all of the hormones, all of the nerves, the neurons that are creating these things that we call thoughts and feelings. It's a very, complex vehicle. And part of practice, I believe, is to, as Dogen said, study this vehicle, become intimate with this vehicle, but remembering why we're doing that. You know, we study the self to forget the self. And this is what is maybe the difference between Buddhism or certain kinds of schools of thought where you might just stay studying the self, studying the self, studying the self. We actually are studying the self to then be able to release our identity with the self. And of course, the continuing teaching there, I think one of Dogen's finest, and we forget the self to be actualized by the myriad things. That's why we're doing this, not because in and of itself it's some kind of wonderful thing, but in order to be awakened and to be contributing and living awakened by the myriad things. So as I listen to you, I don't know if you had a question or an issue in there for you, but to be tapping into your own capacity to feel the pain of the world and let yourself feel the feelings of that feels to me like being intimate with being awakened by the myriad things, but then noticing the difference between that and when it's just, you know, doom scrolling and stressing yourself out, which isn't helping anybody. In fact, the opposite. I think we become paralyzed if we our nervous system can't handle it. We become overwhelmed if we just constantly look at all the terrible things that are happening in the world. So that's not making you more intimate if you do that. And I would say wisely, and this is why I call it embodied wisdom in the essay, you have your own internal sense of, this is not wholesome. I'm not going to do this. Stop it. Put the phone away. Shut the screen. Go outside. You know, and I would say that's different uses of technology and different uses of your own vehicle. But it, you know, kind of in the same domain, the domain of emotions, and that's why it's kind of tricky to talk about this, because it is so complex and individual. I'm wondering if any, I love our conversation, and I'm just curious if any of the people who haven't yet spoken, if you would be, if you want to just put a little bit in, a question or a thought, you don't have to. Never going to force anybody to talk in my circle, but I like to step back and make a little room if there's someone who hasn't yet spoken but would like to take a chance at saying something. Yes. Shujin.
Need your microphone. There you go.
Mike, sorry. So I guess I was just curious. I've been interested in everything that people have said so far. I guess would be curious what your response would be. My entire career has been spent in public service, and so right now I'm a middle school teacher, and so it's like we have this, like, thank you. We have this range of, I would say, sanctioned emotions that we should feel. Like we should love our students and you know, love our profession and our peers, and there's a lot of positivity there, and it's that part is healthy. But at the same time, it's like if we have a frustrating day, or you know, it's a hard year, that sometimes we get in these emotions, like, you know, right now, like today I'm angry at my students, or you know, like because you know they trashed my classroom or whatever it is. And so but that's not a sanctioned emotion, at least in my profession. So it's like, no, we're not going to talk about that. So I don't, you know.
I'd love to speak to that. I spent my first career was a public school teacher. So I taught kindergarten, third, fourth, and I have I think, you know, teachers are the saints of the planet, the under-acknowledged saints of the planets. It's so hard. So I'll just speak from my own experience, and we can see where we want to go from that. Yeah, you know, and I think we do have certain roles as public servants where we have to be, it's not just about what we want to do or not do, but there are these additional layers of implications and expectations for what we do. And I know that when I was early on in my teaching, it would shock me that when I got really mad, of course we get mad at our students. They're inherently frustrating, as beautiful and sweet and beautiful as they are. They can be really, really squirrely, really mean, really frustrating. And I remember seeing that when I would kind of lose it with my students, they would get angry with each other. I could really it was almost like a virus, that they would feel my anger and they would start getting angry. So even if I felt the anger, it was this, there's a skillful means thing here. Probably the best thing to do is not to express it with them, but maybe in the evening, make a date with one of my teacher friends and let's go run on the beach. And I need to really, really let it out about, little Jimmy or little Susie. And I just, I'm so mad at them, really just let myself have those feelings, but really be careful, especially with young people, because they don't necessarily have the psychological maturity or the filtration systems to be able to receive anger. And a lot of them are traumatized by anger, in their homes and in society. So it's a whole nuanced extra responsibility where you're right. It's not even, I think, just sanctioned, but it's also what's actually going to be wise and skillful in this hyper, I don't know how to describe it, hypercharged environment, and where you have so much power as a teacher to really, really, influence the tone. I will say that there were times when I found that when I really had a piece to deliver that was potent, that I wanted them to get, when I lowered my voice and really used silence and would just speak it like, wow, that was not okay. Was more potent than the escalating expression of anger, right? But, my hat's off to you. It's a hard one. And yeah. Any other people who have experience with teaching or young or children and working with this skillful means about being able to be emotional people, but also working with the boundaries of that kind of situation? Yeah. Bayan?
I'm not gonna talk. I just have the experience. That's all.
Oh, and I want you to talk too. I'm not implying that not to talk.
No. I'm done.
You're just saying you've had that experience.
Yeah. I worked as a teacher.
Yeah.
In various environments.
Or, parenting too. I think that sometimes this comes up. Jean, did you want to add something? I know you've taught from kindergarten through adults, and yeah.
And most recently in alternative high school situation. So I spent 37 years in the public school system. And I would concur with you that de-escalating in the moment is exactly the right thing for the student's benefit. And I would also concur with you that once, for example, I feel it as my adrenal system gets plugged in, once my adrenal system gets plugged in and I'm mad, that energy needs to be spent in some way. And, to physically, as you said, get out on the beach and run it out, but also to have somebody who's compassionate listen to me. And I just say, I need to discharge this. Can you listen to me? I don't need a solution. I just need to speak it, and just get somebody that will listen to you that way, completely attentively. And I would concur with you too, that especially middle school, Shujin, especially middle school, the hormonal thing that's happening for young people in that developmental stage, just go, oh, I see. This is what's driving your activity right now. And again, ask, what is the need that is being expressed here? And then for you to be able to go, you know what, I really prefer living or teaching in a orderly environment. What do we need to do together to have you not trash my classroom? what do we need to do together to make this work? But helping them to go, what need is being expressed, and answer the need. Anyway, it's my hat is off to you too, middle school. You've got your hands full.
Anyone else who hasn't yet spoken who would like to speak or ask a question? Yeah.
First, I just want to say thank you for being here and thank everybody for sharing so far. It's been wonderful for me to hear everyone. I've been taking this all in, and as the people that know me here know I don't say too much. So forgive me for going a little off the rails here if I do ramble. But something that's been bugging me the last couple of days is related to an experience I had earlier in the week. I've been diagnosed with PTSD for 25 years. Every year or so since, maybe once or twice, I would experience a PTSD episode. It'd go away, I'd deal with it, be fine. But this past week, I had 5 daily, one a day, right? The last one I had really got to me. In my head, as I was spinning around the emotion and everything, I was going in a bit of a cyclical motion of I'm feeling all of this trauma and I've had it for 25 years. I'm such a bad ex, right? It's like, I'm such a bad Buddhist. I'm such a bad novice priest. I'm such a bad employee. Like it just went spiraling down everything. I'm such a bad everything for feeling what I'm feeling. And for 4 hours straight, I just followed it. I tried to follow it. And over time, the thoughts evened up, that I am kind of settled, the body kind of settled, everything finally settled, until there was nothing to really identify with, right? There was nothing there. It was just something that was happening, right? And that in and of itself kind of set me up for success at that point. It dissolved and I've been okay since. But my question is, and it's been racking the back of my brain this whole time, is how can I take that experience, which was a very real experience, a very opening experience for me, and then help somebody else who goes, well, how do I not feel guilty for the things that I'm feeling? Right? These things are very normal and they're very, just a human experience of what we go through while we're here. But I can't put it into words. I can put my experience into words, but when somebody asks over the course of this week, well, how do you not feel guilty now? I don't know how to express that. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about that. How do you adequately express it's perfectly okay to feel what you're feeling, but in a guilt sense, right? Taking that identification away.
What I'm just curious, feeling guilty for the fact of having certain strong feelings
certain strong feelings or traumas or the stories that we hold on to for years and years and years. Knowing what a root cause of where, for example, PTSD comes from, and perhaps holding that guilt of that experience for so many years, right?
Yes. Just profound compassion for the human condition and accessing our own deep love and acceptance for being human. And, I know that when I study, root cause of trauma, whether it be, actually bearing witness and listening to someone else's story or thinking in my own lineage, I didn't grow up directly in trauma, but my father was a refugee. He was in the war. He was a refugee, homeless, stateless person. When he was growing up, that they didn't even talk about PTSD. He was that generation that of people who had these, really, really hard experiences, and nobody talked about PTSD, and so I know he had it, even though he never said he did. So I have that feeling of, that transmission of that kind of angst and that kind of anxiety, and just understanding what his experiences were. Or I'm sure if we sat together and you shared your experience, I like feel in my own body, like, yeah, of course, all the sensitivity that we have, our tenderness, the lack of support that we have, the horrible things that we see and that we see done. It's completely understandable, you know, that we have these different reactions. So just accepting and loving and being kind and understanding, creating space for each other to be. And I do love going to the teachings of, you know, I mean, Dogen's teachings about arousing practice in the midst of delusion. To me, there's so much compassion in there that it's not about being any bit different than we are. It's about actually, when you find your place where you are, Dogen says, when you find your place where you are, practice unfolds. So that's pretty direct of a message, where you are, wherever you are. And the gift of being one who has had trauma and who is practicing and working with liberating yourself, that is a gift for others, because there's no greater companion for someone who's suffering than to know that they're not alone. Because so many of us feel, we feel like we're defective. You know, almost everybody that I talk to, and myself included, you know, on some degree, we all feel like we're defective. Maybe not everybody, but it seems like a lot of people do. So just that whole thing of guilt, like you know, to me, maybe guilt serves a purpose if you really did something bad and you really need to own it and atone for it. Maybe it's appropriate to feel guilty. But so much of the guilt that we have, it's just completely toxic. It's a toxic shame that somehow we have these messages that it's not okay to be the people that we are. And I just feel like that. I just want to be such a missionary to undercut that and to dissolve that and to try to soak that out. But how we do that, I think, is through our kindness and through our presence. And thank you for your practice. And obviously your devotion to staying with this and being of service so that others may, to the extent they can, be free from suffering.
Cathy, I just want to make sure your time, can we go a little longer? Would it be all
Sure.
right? Or
Yeah. Did you get any other questions in? I'm curious. Or
not so far? Anybody here?
yeah, any other things that you're wanting to explore?
I will ask one more. By the way, I hope that you will write an essay, and if you don't, I'm going to steal the idea. But
What's that?
gathering stories, even from the Buddha, the old suttas, the Zen masters, where what shall we say, their bad hair days kind of snuck through, and we do see a little emotion or a little anger there. Have you written anything like that?
Well, no, I haven't, but I love going into the old stories and kind of curating, you know, pulling from the old stories. I mean, you know, just this essay was a little experiment that I had of, okay, I'm going to go find some emotional ancestors, you know? And so I went on a hunt, and wow. And in fact, even Buddha, there's some stories of, hey, well, right in the canon, I mean, Buddha saying that women couldn't be ordained. Now there's an emotional story for you. Right? And his aunt, Mahapajapati, getting mad at him and begging him, come on, man, we can practice. He's like, no, women can't practice. And then Ananda's like, you know, I mean, talk about an emotional story. And that's right there in the heart of the story of the Buddha.
How do you respond to folks? I get this from time who would say, oh, this is very good. This is very American Zen there. But the Buddha didn't feel any of these emotions. This is actually not Buddhism. The Buddha actually never ate lunch. He only pretended to eat lunch for our benefit, and he only pretended to sleep for our benefit. Buddha never had a bad day or an emotion like that, how would you respond to that, Kathy?
You know what I love about that? I say, really? And how do you know that for a fact? Do you have videos from the Buddha's time? Were you there? See, this is this subjective, you know, oh, don't get me started. You know, it's all stories, you know, and we project our minds onto this thing that we call the Buddha Dharma. We don't know. We weren't there. It was a long time ago. So in a way, we're all projecting, you know, our own values into the Buddha Dharma. And, you know, I'm kind of a heretic maybe in that way, but I would challenge anybody. It's like, really? How do you know that? Were you there? And this whole thing about, you know, American Zen, and as if it's some kind of, you know, like lesser Zen, right? You know, the whole history of Zen, I mean, it has changed so many times. This is not the Zen that they were practicing. I mean, India, right? Indian Buddhism. And then Indian Buddhism got to China and it really changed. You know, the Chinese were like, no, man, you got to work. No begging for us. You know, get your hoe, no work, no food, right? So then Zen people became people who worked, right? And then it went to Japan. And then in the 60s, some of the Japanese teachers came over here. Yeah, sure, I'll ordain women. I'll transmit to women, of course. So we're constantly changing Zen. The Indians changed it. The Chinese changed it. The Japanese changed it. So why can't the people from the US change it, or people from Brazil, or people from Argentina, or people from Poland? You know, I think I forget which teacher it's. She's Angel Kyoto. She's an African-American teacher here. She spoke really strongly on this, and in a talk that I listened to, it's like, nobody owns the Buddha Dharma. How arrogant if we think we own the Buddha Dharma. So
Kathy,
that's what I would say.
You're getting upset.
Probably
Kathy.
get in trouble.
Jean, you had a question? Yeah.
I would start to wonder with what you posed, Jundo, like, what is the need that's being expressed under the need to say there is this idealized figure who doesn't eat, or who didn't sleep, or who didn't have feelings? Why do we have to do that idealization thing?
Yeah, I mean, it really, yeah. And you know, and if there's people who that's what they want to extract from the Buddha Dharma, then I'm like, great. If that inspires you, and if that helps motivate you to be a kinder person and a beneficial person, and a person who's really supporting others to awaken, if that's the interpretation that inspires you, beautiful.
We have a couple of minutes here, a couple of folks who didn't speak. This is your chance. Anything? And don't want to put no pressure at all, but if there is anything, now's the chance. No? Okay. I will ask you, Kathy, you have a book, Intimate Zen, Waking Up to Yourself, that
Oh yes, another one of my unpublished books.
Oh, when is it going to be published?
I don't know. I was really ready to start looking for a publisher right before the pandemic shut everything down, and I got kind of on another trajectory, and so it's just sitting in my study. But what I do is I've totally pilfered all sorts of teachings from it, and I use it as the primary material for all my talks and all my teachings. So I realized that maybe it's a compendium rather than a book. Maybe it's like the compendium of my Dharma ideas, and I cut and paste from it and I'm really happy because there's these well thought out sections of logic that I can just grab and, take to a lecture. So that's kind of what I'm doing with it right now. Like some
Lovely.
of the stuff that I was talking about here is from chapter 7,
Well, if there are no final questions, I'll just ask Cathy, do you have some words to kind of bring us home today and leave us with some wisdom?
I like the end of the essay a lot. And so I will read that. Whether taking refuge by touching the core of our own pain or offering compassion to another, whether receiving support from a circle of colleagues or opening to be nourished by the great beyond, ultimately, this is the invitation of the Buddha way. Breathing fully into the particular and personal truth of our own body, heart, and mind, and then breathing out and connecting with the vast universe of beings. In this place, grounded in the real, open to the ultimate, right action flows as the natural response to the request of the world. So I will leave you with that. And thank you so much for your presence and your participation and your practice. It's really an inspiration and an honor to be with you today.
Thank you too, Reverend Gaman. And remember, we will have people watching and joining this later. If you still have any questions, send them to me at jindotreeleaf@gmail.com, and I will make sure they get on to Cathy, and I'm sure she'll still find time to respond to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love the subject. So bring it on.
Thank you, everyone. Remember, no obligation, but if you feel it, drop a little something into the kitty at the Santa Cruz Zen Center. Yeah, they have to pay to keep the lights on there too. And we love you all. Thank you so much again, and thank you for making time, Cathy.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation.
Okay.
Okay.
See you,
Yeah.
see you guys later.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.